Good morning, everyone, and happy belated 4th of July if you're tuning in from the States. My name is Ramon Osa, and welcome to the Winning Wimbledon live show. With me normally is my partner, Mark Jeffrey, and he'll be joining us in just a second. He's in the UK and just getting back from lunch at Wimbledon, actually. And in today's show, what we're going to be talking about is Andy Murray and how his remarkable transformation allowed him to actually finally break through against the big three. And if you remember back a few years ago, it always seemed like he was so close and he would push these guys to the limit and he would get into a final against a Djokovic or Federer and just never seemed to break through. And one day he had the really good fortune to work with Ivan Lendl, who had a very similar background and very similar story. Took him a while to break through in the big moments. And he decided to team up with Lendl. And Lendl did something with Murray that allowed him to finally believe in himself enough. Because we all could agree that Murray had the game to beat these guys, but there was something missing. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And this is the identity piece that you kind of hear people talk about a lot. And I know we all get enamored with strokes and technique and fitness and even tactics. But there's something underlying all of this that allows a player with a comparable skill set to break through in the big moments. And it is the identity, and it is what people ultimately believe about themselves. And so with Murray, perhaps he had a story in his head that, he would always try really hard. But when push came to shove in the big moments that inevitably he wouldn't pull through against Djokovic and Federer and Nadal. And somewhere along the line, he changed that element of him, whether it was through the training itself, through whatever Lendl was doing with him on the court, whether it was a mental process, and we can get into sort of the mental and emotional areas of the game here because, at the end of the day, when you're at 30, 40 break point and you've got a chance to come out on top or to save a break point and to hang in there in a tight match, what ultimately is going to allow you to play your best in that moment is what you're thinking and how you're feeling, assuming that all of the training that is required physically is in place. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And for you, what this means is you have a concept of yourself on the tennis court. We'll talk about it on the tennis court for a second, and we'll get into some of what our players have been experiencing. That is a combination of how you think and how you feel on the court. And how you think and how you feel when you take that into consideration with the training that you're doing will create a state on the court. And it is that person that shows up in that moment that either executes or doesn't. And so in Murray's case, along with whatever physical training that he was doing with Lendl, he had to have been working on how he was thinking on the court and how that translated to him finally breaking through at Wimbledon. And so I'm just going to pause for 1 second, make sure my partner's got a link to this live stream here. And by the way, if you're tuning in from YouTube or Facebook, welcome. We're talking today about Andy Murray and what we have called Mission Impossible in our Winning Academy. And we all have aspirations on the tennis court, and that might be to win our 3.0 USTA league. That might be to finally, beat that player that we always seem to barely lose to. And it might be to win a national championship one day. And in order to do that, what we need to realize is there are several components when it comes to executing on the tennis court, least of which is not the strokes. The strokes, having the strokes to actually do it is one thing, and the tactical planning. And we've been talking about this over the past couple of days in these live streams. But today we're talking about the way you think and the way you feel on the tennis court. And Lenny Schloss, who you'll hear from in the coming days, has mastered what to think during the point. And Mark and I just recorded an interview with Lenny that we'll be sharing with you guys over the next coming days. And it is so important because I think as tennis players, we all tend to think a lot on the tennis court, particularly in a tight match, particularly when there's pressure, and particularly when the outcome is sort of uncertain. And if things go sideways in a match like that, it's really easy to get caught in a spiral of thinking. And those thoughts that we experience are going to influence the emotions that we feel. And how we think and how we feel really creates our state of being. And if we have a habit of thinking and feeling a certain way, those are beliefs. And those beliefs turn into our identity. And so going back to Murray, he maybe had the thoughts that I can beat these guys, but maybe the belief wasn't quite there yet. Maybe those concepts hadn't been fully formed in his head. And so therefore, he didn't necessarily have the identity as a winner in the big moments. Yes, he had an identity as one of the elite players in the game, but perhaps didn't have that rock solid belief that he eventually worked his way into. And so for you, what this means is if there's something that you haven't accomplished yet on the tennis court, and that could be something technical, it could be something in the realm of competitiveness, then all that means is that we need to get you the right information that is backed by science, that is backed by data, and that'll allow you to inform the way that you train in a new way. Because if you keep doing things the way you've always done, logic has it that you'll keep getting the results that you've always gotten. And in order to change, in order to finally break through your plateau, we have to think about how you're training, but also think about how you're thinking and how you're feeling. Because the way you think and the way you feel influences your state of being. And it is that identity that shows up at break point when everything is uncertain, when it looks like, I don't know what's going to happen here. And it is the player, all things being equal, stroke-wise, fitness-wise, tactic-wise, it is the player that has the most belief, that has the identity that has been cultivated over months and years of training that is going to break through in those big moments. So welcome, guys. If you're tuning in from Facebook or YouTube, let us know in the comments if you have any questions about what we've gone over so far. My name is Ramon Osa. Should have my partner, Mark Jeffrey, tuning in here in a second. This is Winning Wimbledon, and we're with you over the next 2 weeks and possibly beyond. We're having a lot of fun doing this, talking about all of the skills that go into winning tennis matches, particularly in tight tennis matches when things are uncertain. And, one of the stories I want to share with you is just a few weeks ago, actually, I was watching my wife play a USTA league match. And she hears me talk about this stuff all the time. And it was just so fascinating to watch her, though, in her league match. And it was the deciding line of a USTA league match, her women's match. And it was for the opportunity to go to sectionals. And it was a tight match. They had split one set apiece, and they were now in the third set tiebreaker. And so we talk a lot about the between the point ritual, because as you guys probably know, 80% of your match is actually played while the ball's not in play. And it is when you are alone with your thoughts. And the proper thoughts, and I mean proper in the sense that thoughts that make you clear, that quiet down sort of that monkey mind that goes on, and that allow you to trigger your natural athletic instincts. If you are practicing those thoughts in between points, that should allow you to play the best you possibly can for that point. And it should allow you to begin to detach from the outcome, knowing that you've done everything that you can from a training perspective to get you there. And one of the things we're talking a lot about over these couple of weeks is the fact that Billie Jean King's team did a study, and they found out that competitive amateur tennis players were off balance on 90% of their shots. And you're going to hear Lenny talk more about this in much greater depth. But essentially, they're off balance 90% of the time, and they're mishitting about 80% of balls in practice. And so if that's the truth, and we have the data that says that it is, that means that at some level, we're actually practicing the ability to be off balance and the ability to mishit the ball. And what Lenny's done, and what you'll hear a lot more about over the next couple of weeks, is how we have figured out how to reverse those numbers so that you're training on balance closer to 90% of the time. And you're actually training to hit solid shots in the sweet spot about 80% of the time. And so when we put that into the identity piece, which influences directly what you think you're capable of, because as you experience more and more quality repetitions, you get that feedback and you see, holy moly, that ball went off my racket like a rocket. And you get that bit of dopamine when you hit the sweet spot and you see that unbelievable shot that we've all experienced from time to time. But it starts to happen more often. Give me one sec, guys. Okay, Mark is here. Okay, I don't know where here is. Give me 1 second, guys. Right. So as you begin to change the way that you train so that you're practicing on balance and you're practicing the ability to hit the sweet spot more often, and you're training the ability to visualize your targets. And we had talked a little bit about visualization here because it does go into the identity piece. And your ability to visualize powerfully allows you to block out any competing thoughts that might enter your mind during the point. And again, you're going to hear Lenny talk more about this in a recorded show that we just did yesterday. But going back to this piece of the identity, and if you knew yourself to be the type of player that could raise his game in the big moments, and we got Mark here. Let's add him into the stream. Mark, welcome. How are you?
Some say better late than never. Some don't.
No, always better late than never. Guys, so we've got Mark here. Mark, we were just talking about the identity and getting into visualization and how Murray, along with Ivan Lendl's help, somehow changed the way that he saw himself and experienced himself on the tennis court. And you being in the UK, I know it is just when he played at Wimbledon and he finally broke through, it must have been absolutely insane. So love to hear your take on that because it's a unique one.
It was insane. And the English media obviously goes berserk and hypes it up beyond reality. So when you're playing the final, as Tim Henman found years before playing the semis with Goran Ivanisevic, you're not just playing the opponent and playing you, you're also playing the crowd, the media, the global audience, the journalists, everybody expecting Andy Murray to win Wimbledon, the first Brit to do it since Fred Perry. So that takes playing an ordinary match, extraordinary match on centre court, extraordinary match on centre court in the final to rare heights. And what he said was, despite the training and the rehearsing and when he was serving for match point, he could barely lift the racket, never mind get the ball in.
It's crazy. And so you talk a lot about identity. And, you know, if we define identity as a set of thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that we have about ourselves, and we know that Medvedev, working with Gilles Savara, you hear Gilles talk all the time about how he really helped Medvedev reshape his identity. I think this is such a powerful topic that we don't talk about a whole lot.
Yeah.
But I'd like to get your thoughts around how to become aware of what our identity is, maybe, and then how to create one that's powerful so that when we get to break point, and we can get into the physical aspect of the training perhaps later, that we just know that somehow we're going to be able to pull through.
Okay. So if we can talk about that, but I also want to talk about Andy Murray now, age 36, with his metal hip, which I think is even more of a story than winning Grand Slams. So the simple answer to your question is you need to train as match point so that when match point comes, it feels like an ordinary point. And of course it doesn't. And the training will never be quite the same. But the military, for instance, go through progressive training from training the basics meticulously to training how to control emotions and thoughts, feelings, and emotions, how to have tactics that you can execute on autopilot, all the while under pressure. So it might be a staff sergeant or sergeant major whispering in your ear as you are preparing to take a sniper shot, or it might be on exercises with dummy rounds, or it might be exercises with live rounds. And I tell you, when you're doing live round exercise, it's not the same as real life battle, but it's as close you can get to it. So if you haven't done those type of exercises on the training court, then what chance have you got when it comes for real? You've got very little chance. And if your opponent is trained and you're untrained, then what looks like luck and 50-50 isn't really luck and 50-50. It's choice, not chance. And it's like 80-20, I would think. You're not going to win all the time, but the odds are stacked. It's like playing house in the casino. The odds are stacked in your favor.
I'll tell you, we were playing a match yesterday. We had a barbecue for the 4th of July here, and we had 3 really big hitters. One guy played the tour. One guy is a really high level 5-0, and the other guy more like me, around that 4-5 level. And we were at 5-2, seemingly cruising, me and the challenger. And all of a sudden, we're serving at 5-4, and we've got a deuce add in, deuce add out situation. And finally, we broke through. But this is the interesting thing, is even looking at that tour player who was my partner, who I got very lucky to play with.
Wow.
He had an opportunity on a sitter down the middle of the court to put the ball away. And it was a low ball with no pace, not a ball he could necessarily attack. But he pulled it wide. And so it happens to all of us, even in a recreational match on the 4th of July with nothing on the line.
Well, yes. So that's the funny thing about nothing on the line and friendlies. There's only ego and bragging rights at stake.
Yeah.
So it's a very good point. Do you mind if we switch to Murray and Burridge now? Because I think what they've done is exceptional, and there are great lessons to be learned from our community.
Absolutely.
Is that okay? So to set context, Andy Murray is 36, which in the world of tennis is nearly over the hill, if not over the hill. He's got a metal hip, and no one ever has come back to play world-class tennis at his age and with a metal hip. So he won 2 challenger tournaments on the bounce and won his first round at Wimbledon yesterday. The lady Burridge has had 3 ankle operations, a shoulder operation, and others, which has lost her years of playing tennis. Andy has lost years of playing tennis, and nevertheless, she also came back to play at Wimbledon, won her first round, and is now broken through the top 100, which is extraordinary. So what I would like us to explore, if we can, is that how has that impossible thing become possible? because it's not just about willpower and internal motivation.
Yeah. So many people in a similar situation could have said, I've had a pretty good career. I won a couple Grand Slams, some Olympics, and it's been a fun ride. And I've got this injury now, and I'm going to have to go through surgery, and it's going to be a pain in the butt to go through. So I think I'll just call it now, go rest on my millions, and go explore the world.
And he was in pain for years as his metal hip rubbed, to find balance, to find movement, to find the ability to turn and play at a world-class level. And ditto Burridge, it is extraordinary. I think it is impossible. And we have, as you know, a training program called Mission Impossible, Making It Possible. And it would be great just to explore just some of those things.
Well, I think one of the amazing things, and you would never necessarily mention this, and for those of you tuning in here and don't know, Mark, about a year and a half ago, was laying face down on the floor, who had a stroke, which he now calls a stroke of luck, for a number of reasons. And what you don't realize is the man you see before you, again, a year and a half ago, couldn't swallow, couldn't walk, let
Still
alone run,
speak.
which well, that makes two of us, let alone do what he's doing today. So I'd love to get your unique perspective on what was going through your mind in that moment, and how you got from where you were to where you are today, because I think it's
great.
Extraordinary.
And we've got about 7 or 8 minutes. So there's a formula. So I've researched a lot the brain and instincts, both, because I'm now, for the first time, really clear how amazing this 2 or 3 pounds of melon is in our skull. It's extraordinary. And then within that, instincts. So until you've had instincts brutally taken away, and mine took 15 minutes for all my things to shut down, when you can't see, swallow, etc., all those things that you took for granted aren't there. So my research and training, with the aid of a fantastic mentoring team worldwide, through the beauty of the online internet, a top neuroscientist, a yoga lady that specialized in strokes, Lenny with iCoach and Instinct, and 2 or 3 others, different, unusual perspectives in addition to the NHS, who were amazing. I progressed very quickly. Still a long way to go. But the point I want to make is that through them and detailed research, you find out that there is a formula for reliably and predictably achieving the impossible. And what I'd like to do now with my great mate is go through the formula and just do one example of each, for people to know kind of what Andy Murray and Ms. Burridge have gone through, myself, and many, many, many others, that if you haven't yet achieved something because you can't see it, or you haven't achieved it because your brain says, I'm not good enough, or whatever it says, then there's a case history of people who have made the impossible possible, and there's a formula which all you have to do is follow the formula and you achieve your own dreams.
I love this. This is my favorite topic in the world. And if you guys are watching this live and you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. Mark's going to take us through the structure. And if you are watching this on the replay, and any questions that we didn't get to, go ahead and put those in the comments, and we'd be happy to get to them as soon as we can.
Okay, and I want to stress, this is about winning. This is about winning in tennis. And what the channel is all about is bringing views that aren't in the mainstream. So the formula is, if you want to write it down, motivation plus learning plus creativity plus instincts or flow. And each of those 4 skill categories have a subset of skills, stacking we call them, within the category. Okay, so far. On motivation, some of the stacking skills are vision, goals, grit, passion and purpose and curiosity. Also, as it happens, autonomy and mastery, like autonomy to be in charge of your destiny, mastery to repeat things to become great. So the key thing I think I want to make here is that if it was just down to willpower and internal motivation, Andy and Miss Burridge would not have done it. So some of the things would be inspiration, which means having a team around you that kind of have your back. And I had one of those. I think it helps. So I was told on a number of occasions, you have great genes, a bright spirit, and a positive mental attitude. Well, that's good, but it's only good for starters to start the journey. It's not good enough to keep on the journey. My motivation was to lead a tennis camp within 6 months of leaving hospital, and bearing in mind for about 8 days, I was literally a vegetable. 3 ladies to take me to the toilet, etc., which we achieved, Ramon.
We did
so
do
if you
it.
don't have a vision, if you don't have a goal, if it's just someday maybe, then that's not going to be good enough.
And I think that's one of the biggest challenges is how can we believe in a future that we can't see and we can't experience with our senses yet? And how can we use that as, and we can get into emotional rehearsal maybe in a future episode, because this is the juice that allows you to crack on when the going get tough.
As though it was already happening. And to me, and it had already happened. My mentor team, the physios, all said, "You're crazy. Who's going with you? Blah, blah, blah." And I may not have been the best Mark Jeffrey on court, but people got the value. It wasn't just a sympathy thing for me. So no time to get into more motivation, but just understand that it's much more than willpower and your own motivation. The second thing then is learning. And Ramon and I are disciples not just of 80-20, but the fractal 80-20, which means the 80-20 of 80-20 is 4% that gives you the 64% of results. One element of learning. So when they wheeled me into the stroke gym, and it took me, I think, 4 weeks to be considered worthy enough to go to the stroke gym, but that was only by wheelchair. I couldn't walk there in any shape or form. It was a big struggle. And I have some videos of me, if you remember, by the rails, taking my hands off, trying to do the first walk. Bop. If you've forgotten how to stand up and movement, you've forgotten how to stand up and move. So they were training. If you just think about, well, how do you learn to walk again if all the instincts have gone? Calves, knees, quads, hamstrings, hip flexors, and many more things. So there were lots of things that they were training once, which was no use to man or beast. So I asked them, what was the 4%? That would give me the 64%, and they didn't know. So they eventually came back 2 days later and said, heel to toe, Mark. So there I was, because I couldn't walk at this stage or stand, just in my wheelchair by the side of my bed, heel to toe, heel to toe, heel to toe. Now, you might take heel to toe for granted, but at the time, I could only do Mr. Flatfoot. So we got a heel to toe, and then I was able to stand and then do heel to toe, and then I began to have movement and walk. One aspect of learning. So again, there are some stacking skills in learning. all we're trying to get across is what appears to be impossible now is a formula. And clearly with Andy and Miss Burridge, if they've lost a few years of hitting balls and running around just to do what others do, will mean that they are a few years behind what they could do. So they would have to learn and go, okay, what's the 80-20? What's the 80-20 of the 80-20? What team do I need to do around me? What can I train that I've never trained before in order for me to get different results?
And I think talking about 80-20 is such a powerful concept. As we both know, we followed Perry Marshall, who is a huge advocate of it and talks about it in great depth in terms of sales and marketing. But I think this is a great topic for a show tomorrow. If we got into 80-20 and to look at how can we begin to leverage that law of the universe in our training, in the way that we think and the way we perform on the court. What do you think about that, Mark? You want to do that?
I think that's great. And I know we're short of time. So probably 10 seconds on creativity and a little story on instincts and flow, and then we're done for today. Can we do that?
Yeah, I've got a lesson in about 10 minutes, so
okay,
we can do it.
Done. So first of all, there are stacking skills, 3 skills in creativity, including creativity in the box and out of the box. But clearly, you have to research and think and be curious and do new things never been done before in order to get new results. So leave it at that for the moment. And then the last thing about instincts and flow is that is the place for you to train in and be in. And what we're doing in tennis training of instincts, these are powerful beasts. And we have an army of instincts. So I learned that my instincts hadn't left. I had just forgotten how to access them. And our instincts go back to the day we were born, which goes back to caveman times and hunting and fighting and throwing the spears. And in fact, according to my neuroscientist, instinct goes way, 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 way back when the amoebas found each other to create genes. So if you can access instincts like the fabled lady with pregnant child lifting car up, instincts are so huge. But we find out that in tennis coaching, nobody's fault because nobody knows, we're going to get our instincts coached out of us because we are taught biomechanically and breaking down each shot and then put them together again. But under the first sign of duress and pressure, the probability is that one of these elements breaks down. And if you are trained to get out of the way and allow your instincts to take over, your instincts are many, many times better than you. So the ability to train instincts, trust instincts, be in flow as part of the formula to achieve impossible things is a key requisite.
And I think we've all had that experience on the court where for a momentary space of time on the court, in a point, in a match, we just went into the zone. We went into flow, and it was like we weren't thinking about anything. We were just on autopilot and we were executing. And it would be so cool if there was a way to get back into that state reliably and predictably. And yes, that is a big tease. And yes, there is a way to do it. And we're going to continue to sort of unravel how our students are doing that right now and how you guys might be able to do the same. So Mark, thank you so much for today.
Thanks,
I always learn a lot and appreciate everyone tuning in. If you guys have any questions we didn't get to, if your curiosity has been itched, go ahead and post it in the comments, and feel free to share this broadcast with anybody that you think might use it. And thank you again for tuning in. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Ramon.
And I'll talk to you all soon.